Okay.
And I was like, that's an interesting little question. Like, how could I get the cursor to appear on the next line? And what they did is they actually used a print statement to say, what is your name? And then on the next line, they just said input nothing.
There you go.
So it put that way the cursor was on the next line. Kind of
Nice.
clever.
Yeah. I like it. I like it.
Yep.
All right.
Creative coding.
Yeah. Exactly. And again, it's one of those where there's certainly going to be numerous ways that you could do that. I suppose you could also do that with a backslash. And, so again, multiple ways to solve the exact same problem. So, but I do like that sort of print the display and then input separately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make for a cleaner screen sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Cool. All right. So now, I did tell you there was a little bit of magic there. We just simply had that little, NAME equals and input and blah, blah, blah. That's what we had. We should probably define a little bit better what that name was. Well, what that name was is what we as developers, as coders, which is now all of us, all of us, we like to call those variables. And Susan actually put together pretty much all of these slides, did a fantastic job with them. And I love the analogy that Susan has here, is that it's a box. What's a box? It's a container. It's something that I can put something else into. I can store something into it, so that way I can come back and get back to it later. So whatever it is that you're looking to store to use later, that's exactly what a variable is going to allow you to do.
Yep.
So, I always like to go with a slightly different analogy. So I'm going to go with my analogy here, but I do love this one. I always like to go with a math analogy.
Okay.
I forgot to warn everybody there was going to be math today. I know.
You're asking a lot.
I know.
Right. Some of these people are in time zones. It's getting late.
I know, but I'm on my second cup of coffee, so I'm all set.
Go with the math.
Go with the math. So if we come back to my slide here so I can kind of draw my screen, remember back to algebra class where you had something like 206 minus x equals 42?
Yeah, absolutely. Basic algebra, 206, and you had to solve and figure out what x was.
Exactly. What was x? Well, x, as it turned out, was really nothing more than a placeholder. That's all that it was. It's just a placeholder. So you would go in, you would do your math, and don't worry, I'm not going to do the whole math, and you would determine that x in this case is going to be 164. 164. I'm double checking my math.
Okay.
Okay, yep.
So you picked a tough one. But I see that the answer was 42, and that's important.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yep. The answer is always 42. But in any event, so right here, what you're going to notice is that x is a placeholder. So what's a variable? It's a placeholder. It's a box. Whatever analogy it is that you like there, whatever it is that's going to help make it stick for you, I want you to go with that. So it's something where you can store it and come back to it later. Now, needless to say, by the way, why is it that people say needless to say and say it anyway?
I don't know, but I have a feeling you're about to.
I am. Needless to say, and I'm going to say it anyway, you can have multiple variables. And in fact, you're very rarely going to be able to write any level of a program, of a script, or anything that goes beyond kind of a basic hello world without having some level of variable usage. And so what you're going to notice is that you can go in and create multiple variables as needed and give them essentially whatever name it is that you might want. Now, how can you then go in and access it? Well, just use the name.
Yep.
Now, let's kind of break this down a little bit. So, we already saw name equals input. Now, what is input going to do? Input is going to prompt the user for a value, and whatever it is that it gets back, it's going to put into that little placeholder. So if I had on my screen here that little input, and I typed in, for example, Christopher, T-O-P-H-E, it looks like one of your kids grabbed a crayon there. So in any event, if somebody wrote out or typed in Christopher, what's going to happen is this is now going to wind up inside of that name variable. So everywhere that I go in and I use name, that's now going to be, in this case, Christopher.
Okay, makes sense.
So this line of code right here would be equivalent, and I'm going to do it with Zoom It because it'll be a little bit easier for me to do. This would be equivalent to me typing out print Christopher.
Yep.
Those two lines of code are equivalent. Why? Well, because again, name is simply that placeholder for, in our case, Christopher, because that was what the user typed in. Cool. And now I need to kind of clean up my screen there. All right.
Getting a little cluttered.
It is. And there's a little screenshot. When you did this, you used shorter name
That way with
of
Bob.
Bob. Yeah.
Yep. I'm a lazy, I told you, I'm a lazy coder. Even my test names are lazy.
Bob. All right. Now, like we mentioned before, a variable is a box. It's a placeholder. And so if I take, for example, that little box and I dump that box out, what I've got now is an empty box. So could I take that empty box and could I put something else inside of there? The answer, of course, is absolutely. So if I take that box, I empty it out, and I put something else inside of it, now what's going to be inside of there is going to be whatever that new value is. So if we come back to the slide here, what I want you to notice, I'm going to do it with Zoom It. That's a little bit easier for me. There we go. We'll go with blue. So what you're going to notice here is that we said name equals input, and then they typed in the name. By the way, one real quick side note here, you are going to notice that we don't need a declaration in front of that variable.
Yeah, that's one of those ones, and you can open up a whole can of worms of, oh, but you have to be able to declare your variables. Let's not get into the great debate, or is it better to use a programming language that requires you to declare variables or not declare variables? Remember, we said Python is a very forgiving language that is trying to make it easy for you to get going with code. So no, you do not have to declare your variables before you use them. If you use a variable name in a line of code, it goes, I've never heard of name, I'll just make it now.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
There's pros and cons, but yeah.
And
it is what it is.
and this is a debate that we could get into for the next 4 hours, but we're not going to do it. So there it is. So it will just let you declare your variables right there on the fly, and it will try to figure out what it is that you're doing. One of the things that we'll see over the next couple of modules is that this does sometimes wind up causing a little bit of problem when we're trying to deal with numbers and things like that. But for right now, with strings especially, it will just kind of roll with the punches.
It is what it is.
Exactly.
Yep.
There we go.
Every programming languages has things you will like about it and things you will not like about it.
Yep.
So, but anyway, it's good to just be aware that no, Python does not actually require you to declare the variable before you use it in your code.
Yep. Okay, cool. So what you're going to notice here is sort of the same demo that we had before. So what is your name? And then print, and then whatever the name is. And then what you're going to notice here is on the next line, let me just change my color here. We said name equals Mary. Now, one of the things that I always like to do whenever I'm kind of doing demos is I always like to show you based on what we've already seen. So what did we already see? How do I take something and put it into a variable? That little equal sign right there. So that little equal sign, let me just clear out my screen here, kind of make it a little easier to read. That little equal sign, that's what told Python to take whatever it was that came back from here and put it there. It was that equal sign.
Yep.
So if I use that equal sign again, and I say just hard-coded string Mary, and I use that equal sign, and I put that right there into name, what do we think is now going to happen?
I'm thinking that maybe the contents of name have changed.
And I'm thinking you're right.
Awesome.
So again, keeping with that box analogy, we took the box, dumped it upside down, and then we put Mary into it. So down at the very bottom, you're going to notice that we print out the name. So if we take a look at the results here, kind of little sample down here at the very bottom, what you're going to notice, and I'm thinking yellow is going to show up really well here, you're going to notice that we typed in Bob. That was the initial name.
Yep.
And so kind of going back to before, what we did was we took that input, we printed that out, so that's why we got Bob.
Yep.
Then on the next line, we updated that to Mary, and then we printed that out. So when we go to print that out the second time, now what you're going to notice is that there is Mary the second time.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. So with that, let's go in and demo this here. So let me kick out of my slides. Discard. And I want to be there. There we go. Okay. So we're going to keep on keeping on here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to throw in a real quick comment here. Collect a name from the user.
Yep.
And let's just go ahead and display the name.
Excellent habits, commenting your code.
Absolutely. Yep. And then now let's go ahead and update the value. And let's go ahead and say name equals, and let's say Christopher Harrison, for example.
Picking a name at random.
At random.
Yes.
Exactly. And now let's go in and say, we'll say print name. Beautiful. So now one more time, I'm going to click start. There we go. So what is your name? I'm going to put in Susan there.
All right.
And then I'm going to hit enter. And now what you're going to notice is that it prints out Susan the first time. So again, let's go with a better color. There we go. Yeah, you know, one of those things, the tool that we're using to draw on our screens when we're not in PowerPoint is a little tool called Zoom It. You can fire up Bing, do a search for Zoom It, all one word, and it'll be like the first link there. Download it. It's available from Microsoft. It was a tool that somebody named Mark Wasinovich put together. It's a fantastic presentation tool. If you're doing presentations, can't suggest it highly enough. But every now and then it just wants to go, well, you probably meant a straight line. I was slightly off, so it said, well, you probably want a straight line, and that's why I'm slightly off down there. But in any event, so you're going to notice print name. There we go. And then what you're going to notice right there is, once again, print name and then Christopher. So we took what was in name, got rid of it, and then put something else inside of there. Cool. All right. Now, something tells me that there is some form of rules around naming variables.
I mean, I can't just come up with any name I want for my variable? I mean, are you going to be picky about this?
I think so.
All right.
I think so. So let's break it down here. So let's talk about some variable names here, and let's highlight the rules first. So first of all, number one, the rules are cannot contain spaces.
Makes sense.
So gotta have, all one word.
Okay.
Because really, if you put in a space, now Python is trying to figure out, okay, well, did you mean a space because you were going on to the next thing, or did you mean a space that's going to be part of this?
Yeah, or is it two variables, or
exactly.
Yeah, it is confusing.
Yeah.
Space is meaningful in Python.
Yeah.
There are some programming languages where having spaces in one place or another doesn't affect your code at all. Python is actually, there are situations we'll see later today where adding spaces or removing spaces can actually change the way your code runs.
Yeah.
So you do need to be cognizant of spaces in Python, and in variable names, it's just flat out not allowed.
Exactly. Yep. Can't have spaces. Number two is it is case sensitive. And if I
That's a big deal.
It is. If I was to say the number one question that I get whenever I'm teaching any language to a group of people that are learning this for the first time, the most common question, probably the first question that I always get is this case sensitive? Now, my answer to this is actually not to answer the question. That my answer to this is treat everything like it's case sensitive. Because if you treat something like it's case sensitive and it's not, you're fine.
That's true.
But if you treat something like it's not case sensitive and it is, you wind up running into problems. And, one of the questions that kind of come through on the chat window have been things like, databases and so forth. So obviously we can start working with other external systems. Well, one of the things that you find from time to time is that you might be programming in a language, let's say like PowerShell. And PowerShell is not case sensitive, but PowerShell is going to be accessing other things, maybe like SharePoint. And SharePoint is case sensitive all over the place. So if I'm treating PowerShell like it's not case sensitive, now all of a sudden I'm going to run into a problem because I typed something in that's going to be passed into SharePoint where it is case sensitive, and now all of a sudden something breaks. So treat everything like it's case sensitive because it's going to help you avoid those kind of what I like to call mixed case scenarios where it's case sensitive here and not case sensitive here. And really just in the long run, it's going to make your life just that much easier.
So this is just one of those best practices we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
So every now and then, you just want to make sure that, said as a best practice, just assume that an uppercase N and a lowercase n does not mean the same thing.
Exactly.
And you're talking about it here in variables, but it's also important to be aware that that's true of commands as well. There was actually a comment earlier inside the questions that said, hey, I typed input with an uppercase I, and it didn't recognize the command. It gave me an error. Well, those commands are case sensitive as well. And I also just want to quickly mention with the Q&A, something's going on with the Q&A display right now, so I can't see the questions you're posting at the moment. So if we're not answering, we're not ignoring you, we just aren't seeing the questions. So we'll try and get that sorted during the next break. But so the commands are case sensitive as well as the variables.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. The other last rule is it cannot start with a number.
And that's one that people don't expect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this is something that's kind of common. But if you're brand new, yeah, exactly. You're like, why can't I call this, 3 names? And I'd be storing 3 names inside of there and just use the number 3. It's just it is one of those things where the programming language, if it sees a number, it's expecting number. Now that's not to say that you couldn't do name and then the number 3. That would be fine.
Yep.
But you can't start with a name.
Yeah, that's just one of the rules.
Exactly. Now let's keep on keeping on here with our variables, and let's talk about some guidelines here. So this is a big one for me. Should be descriptive.
Oh, the number of times I have seen code where the variable name is A or X. And I'm like, well, the thing is, when you start writing code that has 26 different variables, you start going, what was an X again? Where did I store that? Did I store that in X or A?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if there's, there's a
Spit it out, Christopher. Spit it out. You can do this.
I'm going to get there. So there's a book out there, refactoring code, and it's kind of written for Java, but it's put together by Martin Fowler and a couple of other people, and it has this great concept in there called smells.
Okay.
That code can sometimes have smells, which it's sort of like, you go to the fridge, you open up the carton of milk, you give it a whiff, and it smells a little off. Now, just because it smells off, does that necessarily mean that the milk is bad? No. It means that it might be bad, but you're not going to know until you taste it. And I always love this concept that I'll go ahead and, I'll take a swig. Oh, that's awful. And then I immediately, hand it to somebody else. Here, try this. And, it's not so much, I almost kind of understand the concept of, getting somebody else to test that. The part that I can never understand is the person who's now accepting this. You were just given information. This milk is bad. Here, try this. And of course, what do you do? Okay.
Duly noted, Christopher. The next time you hand me a glass of milk, I'm not drinking it.
Exactly. There you go.
But you're right. But you're right. Sometimes you look at code, and when there's a sense to it of this. You look at the code, and instinctively the reaction is, I can read this, I can follow it, it's clean and easy to understand, or, okay, this may work, but I'm having real trouble understanding it.
Exactly, yeah, and it's not necessarily that it's bad, it just doesn't look quite right. There might be something off there. And so there's that little concept called a smell. And one of the smells is, and I know this is going to contradict us a little bit here, is having comments in your code. Now, that's not to say don't put in comments. Comments are wonderful. But if you have a comment and it's having to explain a line of code, you really should stop and take another look at the line of code that you've written and make sure that the line of code is as readable as possible. And sometimes there's nothing you can do. Sometimes it's just, some little library, or that unfortunately the way that something is built is just a little clunky, and that's just the way it is, and that's fine. But there are times where what you're doing is you're using that comment instead of just writing code that's easy to understand. So if you have a comment saying X is used to store the user's age, that's a problem. That instead of using X, you should be using user age.
Yeah, it's very good to have descriptive names. It makes a difference. And I strongly recommend, if storing a date, or if you're storing a date in particular is a great one. Don't just call it date. First of all, that might be a reserved word that you're not allowed to use in certain programming languages. Call it birth date. Call it expiry date. Be specific about what it is. But yet again, you don't need variable names that are 82 characters long, because that's going to take you a long time to type, and we're all lazy coders. So, but even though I'm a lazy coder, I do use meaningful names for my variables.
Exactly. The other thing is about casing. So let's kind of take a step back here. And remember, again, case sensitive. So you do want to choose a scheme, if you will, which is basically just make this decision and just always do this over and over again. And so I've given you the two common ones, which is Pascal casing and camel casing, which are written exactly the way that, that they're set up. So Pascal casing starts with a capital letter, and then every word thereafter, no underscores or anything like that. It's just simply appended right in. And then there's camel casing, which starts with a lowercase letter.
Which is, if you look at the slide there where it says the word favorite sign and your favorite sign, the horoscope, those are actually examples of camel casing.
Yeah. And in Python, camel casing generally is the way to go. Guess what day it is? Sorry. There's a handful of people that will have gotten that reference.
I didn't get that reference at all, Christopher, just for the record.
That was a U.S.-centric reference.
If there was someone else out there who didn't get it, I'm right there with you. Yeah, all right, moving on.
That was a U.S.-centric one. I apologize.
Just keep going.
I'm just going to keep going. All right. So back over here, then let's go ahead and take a look at some of the different variables that are there, and let's go ahead and highlight the ones that are good. Well, starting up at the very top, we've got variable 1.
So variable 1, that should be valid.
It's valid.
It's got a number inside the name, which is okay.
But it's at the end.
But it is kind of a weird name for a variable. It's not very descriptive.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I look at that, I don't know what's inside of it. So I'm going to highlight that one in red. That one's not really good.
Now, first name, there's a definite problem with the first name because I've got a space in the variable name, and Python's going to get confused by that.
All right, so we can't use that one.
Date, that's one Python would probably work if I use that as a variable name, but the problem with that is it's not descriptive. It said, what date are you storing in there? We often work with a lot of different dates: start date, end date, birth date. Be specific.
Okay.
3 name, Python won't even let me do that. It's going to give me an error because I'm using a number at the beginning of the variable name.
Okay.
DOB, that's an interesting one. It's a valid name. I said Python's not going to give me an error because I've done that. But at the same time, it's a little confusing. I think it might depend who I was writing the code for. Like, you know what? 3-letter acronyms exist everywhere.
They do. TLAs, 3-letter acronym.
Yeah. And if it's an acronym, but everybody in that organization knows and uses every day, then it's okay to use an acronym for your variable name. But,
exactly.
So if I'm working at a hospital and I'm storing date of birth and everybody refers to it as DOB, then I think that's fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if it's not a commonly used acronym, I would stay away from it.
Okay, so we'll put that one in yellow. How about date of birth?
I'm good with that. I like that. Date of birth, it doesn't have any spaces in the name, no numbers at the beginning, and it's descriptive. I think that one's good.
Okay, and then how about your favorite sign in the horoscope?
Again, descriptive, doesn't contain any spaces, doesn't have a number, but I'm lazy, so I would just find that really long to type. So that would be the only reason I would avoid that one.
And going back to something that you mentioned before, context is key. Context is king. So if I'm writing a sign a program where I need to know somebody's favorite sign, I know what we're going to be talking about there. So if I was doing something that involved horoscopes, I'm going to know that's what I'm writing. So if I say sign, I know that I'm not talking about a street sign. I know that I'm not talking about a neon sign. I know that I'm already talking about horoscope. So I could handle this without writing out in the horoscope in that type of an application. So context is key. And again, kind of going back to DOB, is that are abbreviations bad? Abbreviations are a smell. That it can be bad, but not necessarily. Context is king. So if this is something that you would absolutely need to know in order to work in your industry, in order to do your job, then it's perfectly acceptable to use it. If everybody knows exactly what that is, perfect. If it's something where you're having to define it, again, that's a smell, might not necessarily want to go in and do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, prior to that little spot, what we did was we took the box, we dumped it out, and we put in a brand new value.
Yep.
How about taking the box and adding something to it?
All right.
Or working with the value that's already there.
Okay.
Well, this is where manipulating our variables come into play. So why not have the ability to just simply use the plus sign to concatenate things together? So we'll grab somebody's first name, we'll grab somebody's last name, and then we'll go ahead and concatenate all of that together.
That's a really useful thing. You want to, because a lot of times when you're displaying output on a screen, it's going to be a combination of information you have in variables and static text that you want to display. So that's very practical.
Yep, absolutely. And sure enough, you're going to notice, and pen, and there we go. And there, of course, down below is my little hello, John.
So I got to say, that's it worked, but it's kind of, well, I don't have any spaces or anything between them.
Yeah, that'd be a good variable name, I guess.
Space?
Well, no, see, hello, John Doe. See,
Hello,
because
John.
there's no space in there.
All
right.
Okay.
But seriously, folks, so you're going to notice that we do have the ability to add in those spaces as needed. So if you want to put in spaces, feel free to put in spaces. So whatever, string concatenation it is that you want to do, whatever combination of strings that it is that you want to put together, you absolutely have that ability. And so now you're going to notice that's a much better display. I've got my spaces between hello, John, and Doe.
And we were talking earlier about coders make mistakes. I can almost guarantee that somewhere along the way you're going to be doing something like this and you can either have too many spaces or not enough spaces. So just get used to whenever you're doing that, take a look at the output and then go back and fix the spaces afterwards.
Exactly.
We all do it.
Yep. Okay, so let's go back to my Visual Studio here and let's take a look at a demo. So what I'm going to do is, real quick, I'm just going to comment out those little spots right there. And this is one of my favorite little things to do is a lot of times, especially when you're like debugging or just kind of playing with things, you want to turn off, if you will, a bit of code. Well, you can just go ahead and comment that little bit of code, and it's treated just like normal text, or normal text comment, I guess would be a clearer way to do that. So you're going to notice that I can just put comment, and now both of those are gone.
Yep.
So now, and I'm just going to leave those down at the very bottom there. There we go. Let's go ahead and say create a friendly output. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say print, and we'll say name plus, whoops, let's go the other direction. Let's say hello, and then plus, and then name, just like that. Yep.
Perfect.
And so now, let's go ahead and hit start. What is your name? Christopher. Hit enter. And now you're going to notice that I've got hello, Christopher. I still had the one little one from before. Let's just comment that. Come here. There we go. All right. Perfect. And now let's start. What is my name? Christopher. And then hello, Christopher.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Okay. So now, oops, I want to be here. I'm going to go back to my slides. Now, you're also going to notice that you could go in and kind of do whatever you want. So, little storyteller, kind of a Mad Libs, if you will, here.
Yep. And it's funny, it seems so simple, but I have seen an entire business based off this basic functionality. I recently had a friend who got married, and I was trying to find a suitable wedding gift for them. And I discovered that you can order personalized romance novels. You provide the names of the characters, their hair color, their eye color, and it inserts their names into the story. So, so it says, Christopher spotted his wife Karin across the crowded room.
Sure.
Her blonde hair flowing in the wind inside the room because the window was open. But the neat thing is, really, if you think about how the code was implemented to do that, in the end, all they did was the print statement was an entire book. And everywhere the name appeared in the book, they just replaced with name typed in by user.
Yep.
Eye color replaced by eye color entered by user. And they have built an entire business off that functionality.
There's your $1 million idea.
Yeah.
And away you go.
Yeah.
So
I have a friend who was asking, would like crime writer version. So if you're really mad at somebody, you could, have them write them into a mystery of some sort.
Perfect. All right, so you'll notice that you can do kind of all sorts of really complex string concatenations as well there. Now, one of the problems with dealing with strings is that the user can input whatever it is they might want.
Yep.
And sometimes I'm going to take whatever it is they've given me and I need to tweak it. I just need to make sure it's uppercase or lowercase or otherwise. And so wouldn't it be nice if we had some way to go in and manipulate those things? And so sure enough, you're going to notice that we've got that capability. We have a little example right here where we go ahead and we say message equals blah, blah, blah. And then you'll notice that we can do lower, we can do upper, we could do swap case. I wonder what those are going to do.
Yeah, those are lower. I think I might be able to guess. I think lower is going to take the phrase and convert